chapter 1, Why I Almost Quit. So teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Psalm 90:12. And again, I'm going through the book here. I almost quit my journey of leading through the landmines of ministry. We want to let you know you can download the free PDF right now. Begin reading it as well, copying and pasting content, sending it to others. It's available at westsidechristianfellowship.org, westsidechristianfellowship.org. This is going on Audible as well as video casting, so you can watch me reading this. Sounds a little boring though, but you can watch me reading this on our podcast, and I will also be offering additional commentary that's not in the book. So let's get started. By 2024, I had reached a tipping point. I no longer wanted to pastor anymore, and I wasn't sure why. Looking back, I don't believe that it had to do with stress as much as discouragement. It all started during the COVID-19 pandemic. As a church in Los Angeles County, the stress was overwhelming at times. First, there was the stress of the unknown and not knowing what to expect. Second was the stress of dealing with all the contradictory voices, the government authorities giving mixed messages, division among Christian leaders, and people in the congregations of our churches arguing among themselves regarding everything from social distancing to the jab. The number of people leaving California was also alarming, and don't get me started on the masks. So we decided to open our church just 2 months into the pandemic, along with other pastors here in Southern California. We were also able to move to an outdoor stadium for Saturday night services in the summer, and that's when the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors tightened its grip. The stress resulted in everything from lost sleep and overeating to being rude to those who disagreed with our stance. Now, I should interject here. We were never harassed in any way, shape, or form on location at our church. But when it came to hosting something outside in the city of Lancaster, that's when we definitely brought more criticism to our church at that point. Undoubtedly, every pastor went through extreme turmoil during the pandemic. There was no precedent to help us make decisions. At times, I truly felt helpless, but praise God, He strengthened me through it, and we came out much stronger. Our confidence and faith soared, and we actually grew numerically and financially during this very challenging season. Fortunately, we held our course and stayed open, and the spiritual fruit was amazing. Adding to my discouragement was the death of my mom, who was an incredible spiritual encouragement. On September 22nd, 2020, which is about 6 months into this, I received a text from her that said she needed prayer because she wasn't feeling too well, and that was the last text I ever received from her. She passed away shortly after from an aneurysm, and the hospital near Boise, Idaho would not allow any visitors while she lay there in the emergency room talking with others. She died a few minutes later while telling the doctors about us kids. The hospital would not let my sister and brother visit her in her final moments. To say that I was furious is an understatement. I was ready to drive 12 hours and confront the administration, but I decided to sleep on it. God really healed my heart that night, and I decided not to make the drive. I was then given the daunting task of putting her entire memorial service together, including speaking at it. I could feel the stress taking its toll. Now, fast forward a few years when other career options began to present themselves. A friend was adamant that I should run for governor of California, and a few others agreed. In my heart, I knew it wasn't really my wheelhouse, but California was and still is such a mess. And so for the first time in my life, I was considering a different career path, as if running for governor would be less stressful and discouraging. Yeah, right. Then I was encouraged to consider the potential of leading a large parachurch ministry in another state. Since I was still confused, disgruntled, and distant, I definitely thought about it. I chewed on it for a while. As a third option, I considered moving to Idaho. My brother had moved 3 years ago and was doing extremely well, and I was praying about asking to join him and start a few businesses and work together again like we had done in the past. All of these options hit me at different stages of my journey. But as most of you know, many pastors struggle with that, but ultimately I knew, God's calling. I can't give up on that. But we wrestle through things. We wrestle through, just everything that I'm going to discuss in this book, from the critics and the health issues and discouragement. But we know that it's God's call that actually keeps us where we're at. The point of sharing all of this is to demonstrate that the enemy often uses good plans to replace God's plans. For a lengthy season, showing up on Sundays and Wednesdays to fulfill my duties was very challenging. Pastoring was no longer a passion, but an obligation. Wounded on the battlefield. By this time in ministry, the relational pain was also reaching a crescendo. Only pastors know how it feels to pour into people for years and then have them turn on you. It can really wear on you. Not to mention how many friends and co-laborers moved out of California. It was definitely a hard season. Obviously, we have to take responsibility for some of the fallout we experience. But after working with thousands of people for many years and watching many pastors go through similar challenges, the bottom line is that tearing down pastors often makes people feel better. When we lovingly challenge someone about their attitude, their behavior, and instead of repenting or changing and growing, most people take it out on us, and they make us the target of their anger. But it's a beautiful thing when people work on their shortcomings together, including pastors, and the relationship becomes even stronger as a result. But I'm sad to report that's rarely the case. Most people leave the church when they are lovingly confronted. If we add to the mix of people who have a tendency to be judgmental about the worship, the flow of the service, and the sermon topics, as well as what you wear, how you lead, and any other thing they can find to complain about, it can really be depressing. Health can aid healing. Not only was I pastoring and that wearing on me, I was also getting older. But my health was also declining. Once I reached my 50s, there were definite hormonal shifts taking place, such as lower testosterone levels. I also experienced high blood pressure, inflammation, muscle loss, and weight gain, along with other symptoms resembling prediabetes. My joints are basically falling apart. Lots of, years of heavy weightlifting. In my 20s was definitely taking its toll as well. And I was developing what many experts are now calling metabolic syndrome. And this was hard to swallow because I have an extensive background in health and fitness, but the bottom line was that weighing 220 pounds, even at 6'2", might have been okay in my 30s, maybe 40s, but as I got older, it was not working anymore. I knew what to do. I was just having a hard time doing it. Isn't that the case with so many of us? An acquaintance of mine, Gary Brecka, said that 90% of people never sprint again after age 30. I set out to be part of the 10%, but instead I severely pulled and possibly tore my hamstring, which set me back for the rest of the year. Additionally, my blood pressure was climbing and I was out of energy. The downward spiral continued. I appeared fit on the outside, but not on the inside. The clock was ticking. I would wake up in the morning and not want to do anything. The clock was ticking and I wasn't changing. I was still following my pattern over the last 25 years of waking up between 3 and 4 a.m., listening to worship and praying, but I felt like God was very distant and that I was simply going through the motions. Ironically, I was doing well in my walk with the Lord. In terms of my home life and my marriage and family were never stronger. The people I pastor, as well as our staff and volunteers, were wonderful. So it wasn't the people, it was me. I was growing weary, worn out, and exhausted. And in addition to having 5 kids at home, 3 of whom were still teenagers, our church bought 2 radio stations in Los Angeles County in 2019, and I became the de facto manager, accountant, and marketer. If a transmitter wasn't down, the internet was. And if a cradle point wasn't out of order, our air conditioning units were. Even though I had taken a sabbatical a few years earlier, I couldn't figure out what was going on. I quickly learned that you can't thrive spiritually on yesterday's blessing. One more disappointment. After nearly 15 years of pastoring and 25 years in ministry, I was getting older and life was flying by. A true midlife crisis. But specifically, there was one more major disappointment that had a compounding effect. Our church is in a rural area on the outskirts of northern Los Angeles County. And after nearly 15 years of praying for a large, centrally located building with plenty of space for kids, youth, and fellowship, I realized that my dream might not have been God's dream. Some of my pastor friends were planting churches around my home in areas where I felt God had called me to. To say I was confused is an understatement, but of course we can't share struggles like that with others, or they'll think we're prideful and self-focused. But that wasn't the case at all. I was simply responding to a deep inner calling that's been gnawing at me ever since we planted the church. Fortunately, I wasn't jealous. I was just perplexed. I truly wanted other churches to thrive and lead people to Christ in my community. That's an ideal, perfect thing. But I was wondering, did I miss God's will? Something I've been praying about for a long time. And here I was 15 years later with a dead dream. If you've ever been there as well, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I know all about faith, as many of you, and trusting in God, even when we don't see the miracle, but it's definitely easier to preach than it is to live it. I also reflect often on Mark 11:24, that whatever things we ask and when we pray, if we believe, we will receive them and we will have them. Despite all my believing, I was not receiving. The heavens were truly brass. I was worn out and weary. I thought this dream location was a good idea, but maybe it wasn't God's idea. And God will use certain things to keep you humble. We should thank God. He knows what's best. And for some people, just right where He has you, just to grow and to be content and thankful where you're at is the way we really grow, to be honest with you.